If you've watched either of the recent It movies or caught the 1990 miniseries, you've seen Pennywise do some absolutely terrifying things. But Stephen King's original novel from 1986 is packed with forms that never made it to the screen. We're talking about forms that are so wild, so creative, and so nightmarish that I genuinely wonder why filmmakers didn't even attempt half of these. In this video, I want to walk you through 12 of the most disturbing and fascinating forms that Pennywise takes exclusively in the book. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
You helped me once. Remember, you chased those brats.
The Ghost Moon form, Henry Bowers' darkest nightmare. Let's start with one of the most psychologically unsettling transformations in the entire novel, the Ghost Moon form. This one doesn't involve Pennywise turning into a creature or a monster from classic horror films. Instead, it manifests as the moon itself, and that's what makes it so disturbing. Henry Bowers is the book's secondary villain, the bully and murderer who's eventually institutionalized for the murders he committed under Pennywise's influence. Years later, as an adult trapped in Juniper Hills Correctional Facility, Henry starts hearing voices coming from outside his window. He looks up at the moon, and suddenly, it morphs into Pennywise's grotesque face. The moon's craters become massive black holes, and Pennywise's white, waxy skin stretches across the lunar surface like something out of a fever dream. The form speaks to Henry, sometimes in the voices of his dead friends, sometimes in Pennywise's own distorted voice, commanding him to kill them all. It's whispering about the Losers Club, trying to manipulate Henry into breaking out and finishing what Pennywise started. Why does Pennywise choose this form for Henry? Because Henry's fears are different from the children he hunts. Henry fears authority, consequences, and being trapped. But more than anything, he fears that he's lost control, that he's become something monstrous. By appearing as an all-seeing, omnipotent celestial presence, Pennywise preys on Henry's desperation for guidance from something more powerful than himself. This form never appeared in the movies, likely because it would have been extraordinarily difficult to execute on screen without looking ridiculous. Frankenstein's monster, a classic horror icon reimagined. This form appears in the book during two separate encounters. First, it manifests in Eddie Kaspbrak's dreams. Eddie, remember, is the most vulnerable member of the Losers Club due to his psychosomatic asthma and his overprotective mother. In his nightmare, Pennywise appears as this towering patchwork abomination with greenish skin, bolts in his neck, and that unmistakable tragic look of something that was never meant to exist. But the second appearance is more memorable. In the sewers, this form appears to attack Belch Huggins and Victor Criss. When it confronts Victor, it literally decapitates him. Belch tries to fight back, but Henry Bowers, terrified of what he's witnessing, abandons his friends and runs. What's brilliant about Pennywise choosing Frankenstein's monster specifically is that it targets Eddie and later Victor, both victims of circumstances beyond their control. Frankenstein's monster itself is a victim, created and abandoned, and Pennywise weaponizes that tragic horror to terrify its prey. The reason this form might have been difficult for the movies is that the practical effects required to make Frankenstein's monster look believably grotesque, while also being actively dangerous, would have been incredibly expensive. Dracula, the vampire with razor blade teeth. When adult Ben Hanscom returns to Derry and heads to the library to research, he encounters Pennywise in the form of a vampire. This is a Nosferatu-esque creature that King describes with meticulous, grotesque detail. The form that terrorizes Ben is essentially Dracula, but with a twist that makes him immediately regret being in that library alone. The creature's teeth are literally razor blades, and the whole thing is dripping with blood and bits of flesh. It's this nauseating, impossible thing. A creature that shouldn't exist in any form, and yet there it is, manifesting from Pennywise's terrible shape-shifting abilities. Why target Ben with this form? Ben, as an adult, has become somewhat of a protector figure. He's strong, confident, and relatively stable compared to the other losers. By appearing as a classical vampire, a creature of sophistication, power, and seduction, Pennywise is trying to challenge that confidence. It also serves as a subtle threat, because the form actually speaks to Ben. It mentions Stanley Uris's death, and warns Ben that he needs to leave Derry. The movies never made use of this unique form, but I think it would have been really terrifying to see on screen. The Giant Bird, a hybrid creature from nightmare and 1950s cinema. This form takes us back to Mike Hanlon's traumatic first encounter with Pennywise. Unlike the movies, where Mike's initial meeting with it happens through burnt hands reaching from a building, the book gives us something far more elaborate and terrifying. A giant bird. The creature is described as a hybrid between a crow that actually attacked Mike when he was an infant and the 1950s movie monster Rodan, a gigantic airborne kaiju. So picture this, a massive bird with the predatory, intelligent features of a crow, but scaled up to absolutely enormous proportions. It has that classic monster movie design, but it's also distinctly avian, which makes it fundamentally different from how we're used to seeing Pennywise operate. What's significant about this form is that Pennywise uses it to target Mike specifically, because Mike has a history with birds. The childhood trauma of being attacked by a crow is weaponized directly against him. The movies ignored this because the practical effects required to create a convincing, terrifying giant bird that could interact with actors would have been immensely complicated in 1990, and even by 2017. The Doberman Pinscher, a guard dog with supernatural hunger. This form appears late in the novel when Henry Bowers tries to escape from Juniper Hill State Correctional Facility. Pennywise manifests as a giant Doberman Pinscher to aid Henry's escape. It's a massive, aggressive version of the breed, trained and unleashed like a weapon, the form it used to kill John Kuntz, a security guard who tries to stop Henry. The dog's ferocity and the way it's described, with Pennywise's intelligence animating it, makes it one of the more grounded yet effective transformations in the book. Why choose a dog for this form? A loyal dog is something that Henry, in his fractured mental state, might see as kinship or protection, but Pennywise twists it into something utterly vicious. It's also a form that requires no explanation or disbelief from the other characters. If someone were to witness this, they'd just see it as a dog, which makes it a perfect weapon, because it operates without drawing suspicion. This form is probably the easiest to explain why it didn't make it to the movies. It doesn't advance the main plot about fighting Pennywise, and filmmakers were already struggling with pacing. The Teenage Werewolf, Primal Fear Unleashed. The teenage werewolf form appears in the books as one of the most visceral transformations Pennywise undertakes, specifically targeting Richie Tozier. Richie encounters this form, described as a classic full-moon werewolf with snarling teeth, a killer growl, and that classic 1950s creature feature design, and the encounter is absolutely terrifying. The werewolf chases both Richie and Bill on their bicycles. There's this primal, animalistic fury to the form that makes it feel like Pennywise isn't using intelligence anymore. It's just raw, predatory hunger. What's brilliant about targeting Richie with the werewolf form is that Richie is the joker of the group, the one who uses humor and impressions as a defense mechanism. By forcing him to confront something purely animalistic and primal, Pennywise strips away Richie's ability to deflect with humor. The werewolf form is something that can't be laughed at or dismissed as a joke. It's genuine, physical danger. The reason this form appeared in the 1990 miniseries, but not the recent movies, is that the 1990 version could get away with a more obviously costumed werewolf. The 2017 filmmakers wanted everything to feel more grounded and realistic, and a full werewolf transformation would have clashed with the tone they were going for.
Damn it, hell.
The Pregnant Spider, its true form revealed. This is the form that Pennywise takes at the climax of the novel, and it's one of the most disturbing revelations in the entire book. When the Adult Losers Club finally confronts it in its lair, Pennywise transforms into a massive, grotesque spider. The creature is bloated with hundreds upon hundreds of eggs, potentially around 200, though the exact number is left vague, and the implications are absolutely horrifying. This form is described as close to what the human mind can perceive Pennywise's true form as. The spider has intelligence behind it, this malevolent awareness, and when Bill and the others realize what they're looking at, a pregnant mother about to birth countless spawn of the same cosmic horror, the stakes become infinitely higher. The eggs themselves are a masterstroke of body horror. They're these pulsating alien objects that represent the continuation of its cycle of terror. If even one survives and hatches, Pennywise's evil could live on indefinitely. Now, the movies did include a spider form in the climax, but they stripped away the pregnancy element. In the 2017 film, it's just a giant spider creature without the eggs or the revelation of its biological female nature. This choice was probably made because the imagery of a pregnant creature covered in eggs is deeply unsettling even for adult audiences, and it would have been a nightmare to execute in a family-adjacent horror film. The Creature from the Black Lagoon, classic monster film horror. This form appears to young Eddie Corcoran, a victim in the novel who has a particularly tragic story. Eddie Corcoran is battered by his abusive stepfather, and when he tries to escape to the canal, he encounters Pennywise as the Gill Man from the Black Lagoon. The creature, with its amphibious features and greenish-gray scales, chases Eddie with predatory intent. What makes this form so effective is that Eddie tries to rationalize what he's seeing. He thinks that if he can find the creature's zipper, maybe it's just a person in a costume, something tangible he can fight. But when he reaches for what he thinks is a zipper, Pennywise simply tears his head clean off. The form serves as a reminder that rationalization won't save you from Pennywise. King's choice to use the Gill Man specifically is clever because it's an aquatic creature, and Eddie's encounter happens near water. The creature's alien, non-humanoid design also represents how far Pennywise can stretch beyond human-like forms. The movie simplified this by having Mike encounter it through burnt hands instead, which removes the element of Mike recognizing that it can be defeated through understanding its nature, a crucial moment in the book that sets up the kid's eventual strategy. The crawling eye, sci-fi horror from B-movies. The crawling eye form is derived from the 1958 science fiction film of the same name, which means King was literally pulling from obscure B-movies to create his horror. The Losers Club encounters the crawling eye when they head into Derry's sewer system for their first major confrontation with Pennywise. This form is described as exactly what the title suggests, a giant eyeball that crawls, writhes, and moves with an intelligence that's deeply unnatural. It's less a creature with a body, and more just an enormous, diseased-looking eye that's animated with predatory consciousness. This ties into the concept that it takes whatever shape will best terrorize its victims based on their collective fears at that moment. The group of kids, already terrified, already in an underground sewer where visibility is limited, would find the concept of a disembodied crawling eye fundamentally wrong and disturbing. The fact that the losers had mentioned the crawling eye earlier in the novel makes its appearance here more effective. It's like Pennywise is eavesdropping on their conversations and weaponizing their references to old monster movies against them. This form never made the movies because it's so utterly specific and weird that explaining it to a modern audience would require too much exposition. Flying leeches. Parasitic horror beyond comprehension. Okay, this is one of my absolute favorites because it's so creatively disturbing. Patrick Hockstetter is a minor character in the novel, but a significant one for context. He's disturbed, cruel, and has a history of abusing animals in a refrigerator he keeps hidden. When Patrick goes to his refrigerator, Penny is waiting for him in the form of a swarm of flying leeches. These aren't normal leeches that have somehow learned to fly. They're something unnatural, something that defies biological logic. They're Pennywise's creation, manifestation of cosmic horror wearing the skin of parasites. The leeches cover Patrick's entire body, and he's dragged away by it, becoming another missing child in Derry's cycle of disappearances. Beverly actually witnesses this happen and later describes it to the other losers. This form is deeply symbolic. Leeches are parasites that feed on blood, and they're already inherently disturbing creatures. By making them fly and turning them into a swarm, Pennywise has created something that's impossible, something that breaks the rules of nature. It's pure body horror without being a humanoid creature. Flying leeches never made it to the screen, and honestly, I think that's a loss. The imagery is so viscerally wrong that it might have actually been more effective than some of the forms that did make it into the movie. The shark from Jaws, predator across mediums. In the 1980s timeline of the novel, when the adult losers are back in Derry, there's a reference to a boy named Tommy Vicinanza, who witnessed the shark from Jaws swimming in the Derry Canal. According to Tommy's account, the shark's fin alone was 8 or 9 feet tall, and it ate another boy named Johnny Fury. Now, Tommy is described as possibly being intellectually disabled, which initially makes you doubt the story. But the fact that it's included in the novel, and the fact that King has established that Pennywise updates its transformation rosters as time passes, suggests that it did become the Jaws shark. By the 1980s, Jaws had become a defining cultural trauma. An entire generation of people is afraid of sharks because of that movie. Pennywise would absolutely update its arsenal to include modern fears. The fact that this form appears in the canal, the very waterway that's connected to Derry's underworld and its lair, makes it even more thematically appropriate. The shark form never appeared in the movies, almost certainly due to licensing issues. Jaws is a universal property, and getting permission to use the shark would have been complicated and expensive for Warner Brothers, especially for a brief subplot that doesn't directly involve the main battle with Pennywise. The Alvin Marsh form, psychological abuse as weaponized horror. This is a more subtle but deeply disturbing form that operates on a more psychological level than most of the others. Alvin Marsh is Beverly's abusive, sexually predatory father, and Pennywise takes his form and voice as a weapon against his daughter. The form appears in the sewers when Beverly is trapped, and Pennywise, assuming Alvin's appearance and voice, torments her with memories of her father's abuse. It speaks in Alvin's voice, using his control, his manipulation, and his cruelty as a template. The form literally describes abusing Beverly, and the psychological horror of hearing her father's voice coming from the creature attacking her is absolutely devastating. What makes this form so effective is that it was about the original weight of what Alvin represented to Beverly. Alvin was a real human monster, arguably more terrifying than any supernatural creature, and by assuming his form, Pennywise acknowledges that human evil and supernatural evil operate on similar wavelengths. Both feed on fear, both exploit vulnerability, and both cause lasting trauma. This form highlights one of the novel's central themes, that sometimes the monsters we should fear most are the ones in our own homes, the ones who are supposed to protect us. Pennywise's choice to weaponize Alvin against Beverly shows an intelligence and psychological understanding that's often overlooked in discussions of the creature. The movies touched on Beverly's trauma but never really explored the Alvin Marsh form specifically, probably because it's so deeply psychological that visualizing it wouldn't add much beyond what audiences already understood about her past. Marvelous verdict. Why these forms matter. When you look at this list, you start to understand why the movies had to make choices. The core of Stephen King's genius with It was that the creature is adaptive, it learns, it evolves, and it weaponizes whatever will be most effective against its prey. Each form tells a story about the victim, about their deepest fears, about the era they're living in. Pennywise in 1958 uses classic movie monsters because those are the shared cultural touchstones of that era. Pennywise in 1985 updates the roster with Jaws and other modern horrors. The filmmakers of the movies understood that they had to make difficult choices. They couldn't include everything without turning the film into a 3-hour-long slog, and some forms are genuinely difficult to visualize without looking ridiculous on screen. But I think there's something lost in that simplification. Stephen King's It is fundamentally a novel about fear, how fear operates, how it's transmitted, and how it evolves. Every form Pennywise takes is a meditation on that concept. If you've read the novel, you know the experience of reading it is incomparable to watching the films. Let me know in the comments below what you think about these unique forms, and also share your favorite version of Pennywise when the cosmic entity tries to terrorize its victims. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.